Hey guys, this is Z, otherwise known as Dr. Z La Vie, and this is now the second series of my nutrition talk. And this is more informational about research. Hear me out. Basically, I want to go over what are not so great things to eat overall, and generally what are some great things to eat overall, so you're more aware. So, there are certain foods that have been linked to cancer, and they generally categorize in the groups of like anything processed, like processed meat like sausages, beef, um, refined carbs like donuts, French fries, red meats, alcohol, tobacco. And I can go into these groups and explain why they're linked to cancer. And these are basically based on studies that have shown, you know, effects that can lead to cancer. The reasons why they have seen certain foods like red meats, alcohol, some processed food be linked to cancer is that these groups of food have been seen on the cellular level to cause cell damage, which, when you have cell turnover, can lead to cancer. Now, when it comes to refined carbs, like basically French fries, donuts, potato chips, a lot of these carbs are labeled as bad carbs, and I could discuss what that exactly means. But basically, a lot of them contain a high amount of fructose. And if you look at any food you buy now, you'll see the word fructose in there. Fructose is one of the simple parts of a carbohydrate, which in moderation is not a big deal, but the metabolism behind it is kind of why it can cause problems. And generally, excess fructose basically can lead to excess fat storage, and it also has been shown to cause inflammation on a cellular level, and actually has been also seen to be a fuel for cancer cells. So just a little bit of some information that might be kind of interesting to understand or be aware of. So just some things to keep in the back of your mind so that you are more aware. Another thing to know when it comes to red meat and a lot of drinks that you buy that are not just plain water is that basically these things have in common where they're preservatives, and a lot of preservatives, they have done studies that show that they may increase cancer risk, but there needs to be more studies done. And when it comes to red meat in particular, when you're cooking, you're using high temperatures, and that itself basically causes damage to the cells, which can increase risk of cancer, and they call it denaturation or denaturation. But I'm not going to go into the science behind that. So that's just some food for thought. Now, in my prior episodes before my nutrition series, I mentioned the higher causes of death, in the United States. And I said that heart disease was the number one cause. And I mentioned cancer being up there, like I think the second. And so I've already given you some information about things that are linked to increasing cancer risk. But then now I want to talk about things that are increased or basically linked to causing heart disease. And so I'm going to just talk about some general food groups. Basically, when you look at things that they've seen to do this, they'll see things like anything that says saturated fat or trans fats. If you look at products like butter, margarine, certain meat like pork, these things are high in saturated fats. And the thing with this is that these kind of fats, saturated fats, trans fats, they basically increase your bad cholesterol. When you go to your doctor, they check your LDL. LDL is a bad cholesterol because it basically carries fat from the tissues to the cells. And in the cellular level, they basically cause damage to the vessels. They increase atherosclerosis, and we know that atherosclerosis, which hardens your arteries, basically increases risk of heart disease. Now, other things that can lead to heart disease is overconsumption of refined carbs, basically processed carbs like donuts, like I said before, French fries, cookies, cereal, candy, because these things are high in fructose. And like I said, fructose is natural in whole foods, even fruits, but when they're actually in a higher amount in these food groups I mentioned, and in overconsumption, due to the metabolism of fructose, it basically increases fat storage, and it also increases basically the storage of fat and inflammation, and also bad cholesterol as well, which leads to the same thing I mentioned before of causing atherosclerosis and heart disease. So I know I've given a lot of the bads, but I just want to end with some good advice. Basically, foods that can help prevent heart disease are basically things you find naturally, whole foods that are not processed, like fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, and proteins that are mainly fish. Now, in these groups I mentioned, Um, Basically, I also want to mention something you might have heard about with omega 3s and omega 6s. You don't hear much about omega 6s, but omega 3s we know are generally found in fatty seafood like salmon. So for me personally, I love eating salmon and I do it because I know that's a good fat. So good fats are omega 3s. And then omega 6s are good fats. And these groups are basically plant oils like olive oil, extra olive oil, is great, avocado, nuts, legumes. So those are basically good groups. So good fats are omega 3s, omega 6s. And in terms of good carbs, they're whole natural carbs like fruits, and things that are just generally not processed. I can also say including whole grain, stuff like that, oats. So I know I gave a lot of information here, but basically I want to just share that generally the bad food groups I mentioned, they cause inflammation, cell damage, and they disrupt normal metabolism versus the good food groups generally don't. So stay tuned for my next episode, which will be about nutrition myths. And I feel like this is a great thing to know because generally, I don't believe you should not have one thing at all, just in moderation. So take care.